Or maybe we'll start now. I have start. Welcome to ICON's webinar. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to discuss DevOps in the Scaled Agile Enterprise. First, a little housekeeping. All attendees are going to be on mute today, so please submit your questions for the QA section that's at the end via the GoToWebinar dashboard. Thank you. Hey, as everybody knows by now, building an Agile enterprise is really difficult. So in order to affect that change that we need and compelling business results, we have to focus on agility that's developed throughout the entire value stream. Agile initiatives certainly speed up software development, but deployment often remains a significant challenge. So today in this webinar, we're going to introduce ICON's approach to combining SAFe and DevOps to get everyone in your organization on the train, building true enterprise agility. I'd like to introduce our presenters today. We have Dean Leffingwell, who is widely recognized as a leading authority on software development. He's an author, entrepreneur, and software development methodologist, and the creator of the Scaled Agile Framework. Dean has written numerous books on software development, and most notably Software SAFe Distilled and Leading SAFe Live Lessons. Dean is Chief Methodologist at Scaled Agile, and he co-founded that firm in 2011. ICON's esteemed presenter is Marc. He's a versatile DevOps expert and Scaled Agile transformation coach with a proven record of success in building high-performance technology organizations and delivering enterprise-wide agility. Marc's known for leading complex, multi-year Agile and DevOps transformations across a range of industries and delivering measurable business benefits and sustainable organizational efficiencies. Marc's an excellent communicator and relationship builder with a strong focus on cultural change, leadership, business and IT partnership, and lean Agile business practices. Marc, we're handing off to you to get started today.
Thank you, Beth. Great intro. And welcome, Dean. I'm very excited to be here talking with you today about SAFe and DevOps, two of my favorite subjects.
Thanks, Marc. It looks like from our pictures that you have to have a certain amount of gray to be able to have this conversation. You're only just making your way anywhere near my state, but anyway.
I'm on my way. I'm definitely earning those grays. Okay, so this should be a great discussion. We're going to get deep into some content here regarding SAFe and DevOps, how the two are coming together, what ICON has done and what Scaled Agile has done kind of separately, but then how we've been blending the two together in the field for some really outstanding results. But before we get to really the DevOps content, I wanted to set the stage a little bit with a little bit of history and maybe some background and context on ICON's mission. So I always like to start with why. So here, when ICON enters a transformation opportunity or engagement, we're really all about transformation, and we like to start with why. Why are we here in the first place? What are we trying to accomplish for our clients? And really what it comes down to is we're enabling transformation. Not technology transformation per se, not necessarily IT transformation, but we're here really to facilitate a business transformation. So as I believe it was Marc Andreessen recently famously said that software is eating the world. We're seeing that all over the place. We're seeing that as companies struggle to make the switch from an analog world, a brick-and-mortar world, to a digital world. And over here on the right-hand side of the slide, we have some of those disruptors and some of the disrupted that have sort of fallen in the wake of the digital paradigm. So a lot of our clients are really interested in moving from where they were yesterday to where they believe they need to be to compete on the digital stage. And this is really this kind of business level, business model oriented transformation that we're trying to facilitate through enabling cultural change on the IT side. And I really like this quote over here on the left by Buckminster Fuller. We bring this into some of our engagements, definitely our DevOps transformation engagements, to get people, especially leaders in these organizations, thinking about the art of the possible. When we enter an engagement and we're talking about transformation and really transforming the business to compete more effectively, we're not really talking about making existing processes better. We're not here to improve existing processes. We're here to replace them. We're here to change them. We're here to think big, to enable big cultural change. So it's really about enabling these cultural changes within these large enterprise environments that affects a business level change company-wide. But change takes a village. I like this slide from a company called Infotech Research Group. They put out a lot of research and some other diagnostic tools and frameworks to help with IT organizational change, and they provide IT advice, much like Gardner and Forrester do. They provide this framework. So if we think about this, look at this view without the stars on it for a second, just the boxes. This is commonly referred to as the periodic table of IT functions that the Infotech people call the IT management and governance framework. But what we're really looking at here is IT on one slide. These are all of the functions, all of the departments and organizations within a typical enterprise IT environment. So when we talk about transforming the enterprise, starting with IT, starting with the software first sort of mentality, we need to be thinking about all of these functions, all of these people behind them, and all of the processes and handoffs that happen in order to enable the value stream. So the way we approach transformations and what we've seen in the field time and time again is that in order to affect this kind of cultural change that leads to innovative, digital-oriented business outcomes, we need to be changing the culture around all of these functions within IT at the same time. We need to get these people, these functions, and these processes all aligned, all working together, or else cultural change won't happen. So then we overlay the stars. We realize that a very effective way to start to enable cultural transformation within an enterprise IT environment is to bring in SAFe. And of course, ICON is a SAFe partner. We have very many SPCs and some SPCTs, and we're essentially in the business of implementing SAFe for the benefit of our clients. And when we do that, we see that these SAFe transformations help to enable and align and transform the functions with white stars on them. So SAFe directly enables strategy and governance change, people and resources, gets into financial management at the portfolio level of the framework, a little bit of service architecture and planning there with some of the constructs around with architecture and solutioning, and over on the right, especially with application development and delivery and project and portfolio management. So very good at affecting change in these areas, but what we've noticed is that more on the delivery end, after the software is developed, when we bring in the infrastructure and operations view and the security and risk view and some of the data and PI view, there's less cultural change, or those functions, those people, and those processes are later adopters of the Agile mentality. So this is where we're able to bring in DevOps, which directly addresses those people and those functions and those processes, fills in the gaps, and what we're left with is sort of a map here of enterprise IT, where by applying scaled Agile and DevOps together, we're able to affect cultural change throughout more or less the entire IT landscape. And what that does for us is it aligns the people and the processes and the technology and the tools across the software delivery value stream, and really helps to lean it out and build velocity and quality from end to end, getting people aligned, getting operations on the train from a DevOps perspective, and really enabling acceleration and delivery velocity through the end-to-end software delivery cycle. So we've kind of established that SAFe and DevOps are better together because we can use them effectively together as building blocks, as puzzle pieces, to bring alignment to the organization and to bring velocity and quality and stability and resiliency to the entire end-to-end value stream. So we look at where the guidance is. How can we apply these methodologies and these tools and these ideas and these concepts most effectively? Well, over on the right, over on the left, I'm sorry, we've got the Scaled Agile Framework. So we have a nice packaged methodology and set of tools and set of advice, and essentially a playbook that allows us to apply these concepts in more or less a prescribed way that gives us confidence that we can build agility at scale using those techniques. Over on the right, on the DevOps side, the field is a lot wider open. We don't really have a playbook. There really isn't an agreed upon DevOps manifesto or even a standard definition of DevOps. So the field is wide open. It's anybody who is interested in delivering DevOps, building DevOps capability, implementing DevOps, in a lot of ways is left to roll their own or bring their own ideas to the table. Having to cull information, ideas, insights from a number of different sources, including books, conferences, meetups, experience in the field, and cobbling together their own experiences into an approach that makes sense. So when ICON first started this journey and started to go to market with DevOps capabilities within a Scaled Agile context, we were using version 4.0 of SAFe. So over on the left, we have the SAFe 4.0 big picture. If you look really closely over on the left of the SAFe big picture, you'll notice a little red circle around DevOps. So
yeah,
DevOps
Marc,
was...
Yeah, you do have to look pretty closely, don't you?
Yeah, it's in there. It's in there. So really what we've done is we've magnified that DevOps view of SAFe 4.0, and we've applied our own principles, we've applied our own logic, and we've brought in a lot of this information, synthesized learnings and reference material from the sources over on the right. We tried to blend it in with the SAFe 4.0 methodology to bring success to our clients. So that was SAFe 4.0, but now, of course, we have the benefit of SAFe 4.5, which has baked in a lot more additional insight and guidance around incorporating DevOps into the Scaled Agile mentality. So at this point, Dean, I think this would be a good segue into your piece. Can you tell us about some of the innovations around DevOps that have been baked into the latest version of SAFe?
I absolutely can. Go back to this picture here. SAFe has always done DevOps. There's good reasons for that, but I think our view has been somewhat a traditional view, which is that DevOps is primarily a set of activities associated with more quickly deploying a thing. Well, it's a little broader problem than that, and as we evolved to version 4.5, in that release, it was a major release theme. And you see here the 4 release themes for version 4.5. Essential, safe, and configurability, innovation with lean startup and lean UX, scalable DevOps and continuous delivery, and the implementation roadmap. Well, the sweet spot of that, and I think the centerpiece of all that activity, is us taking a step back and saying, not only does SAFe have to do DevOps, it has to provide the right type of guidance for a full lifecycle view, not just how I might deploy a set of, a new set of features that I have, but where they come from through continuous exploration, continuous integration, continuous deployment, how they get released, and of course then the view of DevOps, which is culture, automation, lean flow, measurement, and recovery. So as opposed to the little icon in the corner, we have substantial new content, which I'll be able to introduce you here in the next few minutes. Specifically, what is DevOps? As Marc said, there's no great standard definition for that, but our definition is kind of a generic one, which is we just simply need to bridge the gap. And if we think about our worlds here in this little chasm, the crack in the middle, and you think about what are we as developers motivated for? What are we compensated for? What do we like to do? We like to create new stuff. We like to create change. We wake up every day and we want to add or modify features. I want to do that with the framework every day. But what about the things on the right, right? The things on the right are the things that are slightly different levels of motivation. Sorry, I hit that too quickly. The things on the right are people that are working to maintain stability of existing environments. 3 nines reliability, constantly available services. Make sure that your existing solution doesn't go down. So we have really different motivations, and yet together our motivation is one and only one thing, and that's to develop and deploy new functionality more quickly to the end user. So we see DevOps as a capability of every Agile release train. The Agile release train, as you know, is the thing that delivers the value, and if it can't do DevOps, well, nobody's going to do it for them. And the reason this is so critical is that SAFE has taken for years now, I would say, a value stream view, which is that our job isn't simply to write code or test code or even deploy code. Our job is to understand what new features and capabilities we'd like to deliver to the business, and then we walk through the process of defining and implementing and deploying that stuff. So we can't stop SAFE and say, oh, there's a great big blob of new binaries there that would be fun to deploy. We have to take a full life cycle view. Now, when we talk about DevOps, we talk about it as kind of a new thing because it's this concatenation of two somewhat unlike things. But the reality is you're already doing DevOps. Anybody that's deploying is already doing all of these functions, and the only question is how efficient it is. Probably, Mark, you could probably comment. 3 or 4 years ago, actually, why don't you comment? 3 or 4 years ago, this was CAM or CAMS, wasn't it? This acronym?
Yes, that's right. It started as CAMS.
And what was that?
So culture, automation, measurement, and sharing was in there. And then an interesting thing happened with the L.
And why the L?
So the L was inserted because there was a realization that the DevOps pipeline, the delivery aspect, after the software is written and before it's delivered to the hands of the users, really required a lean mindset, much like the Agile pieces upstream, Agile software development pieces did upstream. We still need to value concepts like small batches, efficiency, the reduction of waste, and building in quality through that last mile of the value stream. So the people behind the acronym felt it was really important. I think it was actually Jez Humble's addition with the L said that we really need to bake a lean mindset into DevOps as well.
Yeah, if we had a great deployment process and it has a big batch and then it's starved for another big batch, it still doesn't really work. And the R is recovery. So we've simply extended that to talk about culture, automation, flow, measurement, and recovery as our acronym. And it's not a perfect word, obviously. Calmer isn't with no E in it, isn't a word in the English language, but it works and it's memorable and it builds on what has happened before. And I'll talk briefly about each of these. First of all, it's a cultural shift. DevOps is a culture of shared responsibility. So if I've traditionally operated on the infrastructure management side, I'm going to have to now take a further look upstream, participate in PI planning, help people understand what the configuration requirements are on my side. If I've typically operated on the development side, my goodness, I now have responsibility all the way through to deployment. So when I deploy a thing, I'm not done because I shipped a binary off or it got moved to production. I can't be done until it's really delivering value. So, and that requires a certain tolerance for failure and rapid recovery, as we'll talk about in a second. It also requires knowledge sharing. So the growth from I skills, which is, I can do this one thing, to T skills, which I can do this and the other, to E skills, which is I can maybe write a piece of code, configure a server, deploy it, and run a regression test. Those are the type of skills we need. So culture is a huge part of DevOps. Now, oftentimes, and I think from a vendor perspective, DevOps might devolve, if you will, into deployment. If I could automate deployment for sure, and I didn't have such a massive cost involved in deploying, that would be a good thing to do. When it comes to deployment, we need to automate that deployment process, and we have quite a bit of guidance and SAFE around that now. You can see those bullets here. Our development environments need to be pretty close to production, and by the way, they typically aren't. We recently did one of our clients did a quick study, and they said that only about 30% of the applications were configured the same rev level, same APIs, same updates applied in development as they were in production. And you can see the others as well. We're going to have a staging environment. Even if I'm building a satellite that's only going to go up once, I'm going to have a staging environment that says, can I emulate that satellite? Can I put my new hardware and software on that satellite and make that work? and have to deploy a working system to staging every iteration, because that's what incremental development is. It's not incremental development on my desktop. If you can't automate testing, then we're going to have an issue. And the reason is that if we want to deploy more often and we have to manually test all the features of that application, we're going to run out of gas. Frankly, our costs are going to go up, not down. And then, of course, the things that I think traditionally we looked at for DevOps, which is how do you automate deployment, and there are tips and lots of good technical advice. We'll hear more about that as we proceed on that topic as well. Flow. So I mentioned briefly here, and you see down below this cost of what total cost is of any process that's flowing. And the total cost is a combination of the holding cost and the transaction cost. So if we look at that from a DevOps perspective, the holding cost might be a really big batch that's going to rot before it gets deployed, and I have customers waiting. The transaction cost is a transaction of deploying that. And if I don't have to deploy very often, then my transaction cost is low because I only do it once, and that's going to drive me to higher batch sizes. But if I want to deploy more often and that transaction cost is too high, then I'm going to have higher total cost. So we need to move to a process that really understands that this is about batch size. It's about deploying small amounts and driving that transaction cost down, and that's part of the continuous flow of value. And in this version of SAFe, we updated, as you can see here, the program Kanban. Now, this is not necessarily your Kanban. Kanbans are designed to be modified and updated, but as soon as we put this up and done a few kind of prototypes internally of some of our flow-based processes, and when your Kanban shows releasing and released and done as a state, then you worry about that. If your Kanban only shows, we got it all the way up to a code complete or validated on staging, then we don't have the right attention to the real full value stream. So that's a freebie, if you will, kind of a takeaway that says we really want to rethink the way we visualize work inside our program. And, I suspect some of us have an off-again, on-again relationship with measures. Many of us have been measured in ways that we didn't appreciate, and sometimes we measure the wrong things. Measurement changes behavior for sure. Measurement also certain overhead. Well, in a DevOps environment, we measure everything. I mean, if we can't read the logs and parse them and understand what the issues are, how could I, as a developer, help debug a problem that occurred in production? And by the way, do I have to check constantly, or are those measures broadcast? If you look at case studies from like the DevOps Summit, places like CSG Corporation, they've built in telemetry for their applications, and they don't talk about 100 data points or even 1,000. They talk about tens of thousands and 100,000 potential data points that report on the state of the system. Because if you want to know whether or not the system is working, and it's a complex system, it needs to tell you. So we want to measure everything, and that's the M in that process. We want to architect for releasability and recovery, and this is what I think one of the key lessons. If you look at those so-called unicorns on that earlier slide that Marc put up, the Googles and the SaaS companies and the Salesforces of the world, we have a little bit of experience with those types of companies. We've kind of touched on them in the past, and what we've discovered is that virtually all of them have gone through multiple significant architectural refactors. Because if I want to be able just to release a small thing, that small thing has to be fairly logically independent of all the other things. So when we architect that way, we have to think about the stop the line mentality, which is, wow, I've deployed this thing, I've got a defect in the test case, stop everything, fix that test case or fix the defect. We have to plan for and rehearse failures. I mean, in the DevOps handbook and in earlier works, they talk about the chaos monkey, the Netflix thing that just goes out and shuts down servers, corrupts databases, corrupts pieces of code, and it just does that all day long, every day. So that Netflix got really, really good at fixing things. And when the Amazon Web Services went down, Netflix was one of the only companies that actually remained running because they had so much built-in recovery. And there are a lot of tools. I mean, there's some new technologies and there's new ideas and new practices and feature toggles and dark launches and these things that you can read about in the DevOps handbook. Those are important ways to think about the problem. We'll discover that releasing is not necessarily, a monolithic thing. And if we go back a little bit, and I didn't say that I was going to talk about the lean startup, but guess what? I am going to talk about a little bit because that's another major incorporation. And if we think about the lean startup and what it wants to do, it wants to hypothesize, build, measure, and learn. It wants to get feedback as quickly as possible. If I can't get fast feedback, then I'm going to be delayed in my innovation. I'm going to be really stifled. So if I don't have the ability to take a small batch and move it through the system, explore, continuous exploration, and find it, integrate it, and deploy it, and release it, I can't learn. And if I can't learn, I can't really do innovation. So we don't see lean startup and lean UX as separate schools of thought. We see those as ways to think about innovation and ideation by taking smaller bites of the elephant and moving it all the way through the pipeline. And if we can't move it through the pipeline, we're going to be stymied in our ability to innovate and stymied in our ability to release more frequently. So in that regard, we had to think very deeply about this over the last close to 2 years, our view of the continuous delivery pipeline and release on demand. And if you pop open SAFe right now, it's easy to do that. You read about continuous exploration, we talk about where good ideas come from. What's the role of the product manager, and how do product owners participate in that? We talk about continuous integration, not from the standpoint of, I checked out my code and I worked a few hours and I checked it back in. That's part of it. But does the whole system work? Does that satellite, or is that monolithic application that consists of 20 subsystems, is that fully integrated? And how are we deploying that? So there's tons of new content there. Encourage you to go to SAFe and read about the new guidance we have in that regard. And as I mentioned, when we visualize and manage the full flow of value and add work and process limits at the right state, things start to flow. And I will give you a tip here. If you visualize your current system and use it for a bit, within days or at worst case a week or two, you will discover where the real bottlenecks are. And you'll discover that we can't get to the staging environment, or we don't have enough licenses for our testing application, or whatever it is. So visualizing and managing the full flow of value is going to give you the ability to see the work. And one of the challenges we have when we think lean is you go in a lean manufacturing plant, you can see where the inventory is. Well, our inventory lives on servers. And as you know, we have some pretty big servers. So we can have a lot of stuff in flight and not even know it. So we have to be able to visualize and manage that full value flow. And that's what enables continuous delivery, right? If we think about the art now as having the ability to live up to its namesake, it is an Agile release train. It's not an Agile development train. It isn't called that. And it's a train because it does its development on a cadence, but it can release at any point. So DevOps, this capability, that's what gives us the ability to do continuous delivery. So those aren't the same thing. If I have a strong kind of DevOps function, a high degree of automation, a high degree of cross-functional training, then I actually have the ability to deliver continuously. But as we also know, not every customer wants everything continuously. We certainly don't want to, update the big picture tomorrow and then wrap it back through all the courseware, et cetera. At the same time, we want to be able to work behind the scenes and advance what we're doing. So we call this, our view of this is release on demand. Is it continuous release? It depends. For many it is, but that's not the ideal state for some. For others, to be able to put out a new release twice a year is a pretty big deal. If you're shipping infrastructure software to Verizon and they're running their entire network on your new kind of application monitoring capability, and that's an active application that reports and potentially even interferes if it fails with the ability to to deliver a phone call, you may not want to have that thing updated overnight, no matter how good you believe that your partner, supplier, vendors test capability is. So we have to pick based upon our customers' view of the world, not our view of the world, and therefore we think of this as develop on cadence, but release on demand, release whenever you need to release. Further,
hey Dean.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dean, could we riff on the topic of releasing on demand and continuous deployment for a second?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
If we could go back, could we go back just one slide? I think this was a very, very important addition, modification to SAFe 4.5 over 4.0 that was very welcome by us and really drives the point of DevOps home. So if we look at this, the release on demand pipeline, if we look at the continuous exploration, continuous integration, and continuous deployment pieces down there, the continuous deployment piece is really a new construct in SAFe 4.5 that seems like it replaced the idea of potential shippability, potentially shippable products in earlier versions.
I think that's largely true. I think that's an evolution. And I think if you look at 4.0 right now, you'll see basically the same thing. But I don't think it's articulated in a way that says this is how we do that. This is how we think about the problem. These are the tools that we use for exploration, integration, and deployment. So I think our evolution is a lot like the industry's, better understanding of how to achieve what we know we want to achieve, which is the ability to release whenever our customers need it.
Mm-hmm. I think what I find really interesting about the switch, or the addition or the emphasis on continuous deployment in 4.5 is we don't just want to strive to be potentially shippable at every increment. We actually want to be deployed to a production environment, whether we're live to users and whether we're actually released in that production environment is somewhat irrelevant. But really, what we want to strive to do is get our changes into a production, into a live environment where we can release on demand, essentially by flipping a switch. So I think that's a very important piece of the evolution, the DevOps idea, the continuous delivery idea.
And I agree, and I think that's a subtlety that is huge. It's not an issue that we've got this thing, we've got it coded on our desktop, we've got it in the baseline, we've got it deployed, we've got it in staging. It's actually in production. And then we can choose how to release that. And we can release it in a controlled process. We can say, I want to release this to one customer. Or we can even watch the functionality, in a dark release. We can watch the functionality in the background before we even deploy it. Those are some of I think, the real, fundamental ideas that help us think through the problem differently. Because if we have to know absolutely that everything we do that gets shipped into the production environment is immediately released to the user, that creates a really high barrier. If we have ways to go ahead and deploy that stuff in production and monitor it with our telemetering, now we've got a safety factor, right? We've got the built-in margins that we need to say, well, guess what? Yes, that's deployed, but I'm seeing a bunch of buffer overflows here. I'm seeing the disk fill up where I never saw that before. I'm seeing some new behaviors, and I can still correct that. But I've learned that from the production environment, not from my emulation environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another not so subtlety here is that people tend to think about releasing their app or their system in a kind of a monolithic way. But we're building big systems. We're building systems that we couldn't even think about 5 and 10 years ago. And I wouldn't say that SAFe itself is an enormously complex system. I mean, it has its complexities. We're hosted on Amazon Web Services. We follow their local distribution model. We use all their tools and techniques. We've got hundreds and literally hundreds of WordPress widgets, etc. But if we take this and think about what are our value streamlets, maybe you look at the bottom one, you say, well, that bottom one, that's the big picture, and that encapsulates a lot of things behind that picture. There could be lots of features there, but we also have the ability to make a quick change if we need to patch a security flaw or some discovery, or the ability to put up a blog post to clarify a question, or even to change an article. And that's a small system compared to what you folks are building. So in these large systems, this is part of our refactoring, our re-architecting. We have to think about what's releasable. And as you look at this and start to really understand it, it even affects what the art is. Why do I structure an art with these folks? Why are these people a good art? Because they can release. And within that, can a team release? Can a team just maybe update an API or put out a few web services? Can the team deliver a feature to the end user independently or not? So the actual design of our organization, the design of the architecture itself gets refactored, potentially multiple times until we get to the point where we now have a way to release more frequently. So it's not just simply a matter that I've got good ways to automatically build, the servers I'm deploying on. It's a matter of rethinking the whole thing, from the organizational model to the skills of the development team and the production team members to the way we've architected the system to support releases. We call those things value streamlets. We tend to use the word internally. We haven't really called that out as a prime artifact in SAFe, but I think we start to think about that. And when you look at the DevOps handbook specifically, they talk, Mark, a lot about, what value stream. If we're trying to, look at value stream thinking 101, reduce time to market. Well, reduce the time to market for what? Okay, well, the whole thing or some element of the thing? Which element of the thing best lends itself to releasing more frequently? So our whole design, our whole strategy, it isn't a matter of I've got some great deployment automation now. It's a strategic view of what it would take to evolve our organization and our technology to be able to release whenever we want, whichever element we want. So Mark, I think you're going to talk a little bit about how you make all that work.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that, Dean. Great walkthrough of the DevOps constructs, additional guiding material in SAFe 4.5. We're really excited about those additions and those concepts, building upon the original ideas and earlier versions of SAFe, and just getting DevOps more tightly integrated into the SAFe framework. So SAFe does DevOps. SAFe is doing more and more DevOps. Very exciting.
Mark,
I'm going to talk a little bit about...
Mark, I think you recognize that SAFe talks about DevOps. You and the people in the field do DevOps.
Right. So let's talk about how we are doing DevOps in the field. I'm trying to advance this slide. There we go. So great. Now over on the left-hand side of this picture, essentially the same view as what we saw in the earlier slide, but now we've replaced the 4.0 version of the big picture with 4.5, and we can see where DevOps is much more prominent than the framework. We have the continuous delivery pipeline. We have the concept of continuous deployment and policing on demand, decoupling those two. DevOps called out right over there in the right-hand side. We still have the system team over there on the left. Really want to emphasize the importance of the system team and the DevOps concept as sort of the enabling mechanism for building a DevOps culture, along with all of the other bits and pieces, the concepts and the frameworks and the details that Dean went through earlier. So we're seeing how SAFe and DevOps are moving closer together because we know that they're better together and they work together very nicely in the field. One thing that I'd like to mention about how compatible SAFe and DevOps are has to do with the lean underpinnings. So I wanted to mention this a little bit earlier when I was talking about the Infotech periodic table. So when we were looking at the stars and how Agile at scale applies to a certain audience and DevOps seems to be tailored to a certain audience. And then Dean had a slide that walked through sort of the duality between Dev and Ops. Well, the Dev people kind of want to move to the right really quickly, but then the Ops people are more resiliency and stability focused, and they want to kind of press the pause button on a lot of those changes. So we have sort of Dev is from Mars and Ops is from Venus kind of mentality happening with a wall of confusion and siloed mentality usually in these big enterprise environments. We start to break down those walls by bringing in scaled Agile and by bringing in DevOps. But with all of this duality between these two groups, how is it that SAFe and DevOps are so compatible? Well, what I really wanted to point out was that because SAFe and DevOps are lean underneath, kind of rooted in the same principles of efficient flow and reducing waste in small batches and building quality in, it makes them inherently compatible. So putting the two together just makes sense, and we're seeing how, because they just make sense and we're seeing successes in the field, we're seeing more and more of the blend of scaled Agile techniques and DevOps techniques, and it's really reflecting very strongly in SAFe. So very exciting for us. What we've done on the right is we have produced our own framework, so our own body of knowledge around DevOps and a particular approach that's that we've gleaned from various sources. So, again, from the slide from earlier in the deck, we've read all the books. We go to conferences, we go to meetups, and we stay plugged into podcasts. We experiment in the field, and we're kind of keyed into the DevOps movement and the DevOps culture as it's sort of evolving and emerging in the industry. So we've taken all of that, and because we don't want to subject our clients to having to go through all of those experiences before they can start to gain traction with DevOps, we've synthesized that material and we've baked it into our own framework. And so the icon on the right is a visualization of our framework. So what we've done is we've put that information into a package, and we've included this visual framework that I'll walk through briefly on the next slide. But this is a visualization of the framework. We kind of affectionately refer to this as our big picture for DevOps. We use it in a lot of the same way that we use the SAFe big picture as sort of a learning aid and a big visual information radiator during our engagements. But then behind it, we have course material, we have techniques, and we have workshops, and we have a maturity model and lots of other supplemental material that helps develop a playbook and a recipe book for contemplating and strategizing and executing on a DevOps initiative. So this is where we are today, SAFe 4.5 plus our DevOps framework, blended together with all the right touch points and delivered in conjunction in the field. So this is high level how we're implementing SAFe and DevOps today. So I want to walk briefly through this framework. There's a lot of detail here, so I just want to touch on on some of the highest level points, some of the most important aspects of the framework. So I wanted to point out the value stream concept there at the top. So as we go from plan to coding to operate and then planning again, this is sort of the continuum, and this is our value stream continuum, where we have the business of IT working in conjunction with the business on continuously planning and continuously developing work and continuously deploying and operating that work, and then just kind of repeating this cycle as many times as we need to. Sort of this is the business that IT is in. So this is the value stream. We align this part of our framework with the value stream concepts of SAFe, which map back to how our clients' companies make money and where they're going strategically with their product sets. And we align this sort of left to right directional flow with those value stream concepts. As we start with business concepts over on the far left, and moving them through to cash on the right-hand side. The stuff in the middle is where we've kind of broken into that pipeline, broken into that value stream right at that midpoint, just as the developed code is being committed to a repository. So imagine right there at that 12 o'clock position being the point at which the human-readable source code that's been developed by, say, a Scrum team gets committed into the source repository and goes from human-readable source code to binary form. And once it kind of makes that conversion, we're sort of locking in the idea that we think this is ready to move through the pipeline and get in front of users. And so that kind of kicks us into the deployment pipeline, which takes us clockwise around the circle before we get to operate, before we get back to operate. And what we're really trying to do as we move around this circle through the deployment pipeline is ensure that we're doing build activities, test activities, and release activities in the right way with the right people at the right times, using DevOps techniques and using lean techniques, so that as that code is kind of dropped into the pipeline, we're building, we're unit testing, we're integrating, we're doing other forms of testing, sometimes in bulk mode, sometimes individually, but whatever we need to do to verify and validate that those changes are good and viable for production consumption, we're doing that through the pipeline. And then as we get into more of a release phase, we're configuring environments well, we're staging that code on a regular basis, and we're deploying efficiently, and we're doing final verification and validation of those changes in a production environment. So going from the 12 o'clock position over to the 9 o'clock position really gets us from a developed state to a deployed state through the pipeline. And then that transition stage is a special little stage where it's really not workflow-based, but it's more capability-based. We want to make sure that we're not just dropping changes rapidly into production on a more frequent cadence without assuring that we have the right level of monitoring in place, without assuring that we have the ability to respond to incidents in production or the ability to recover from problems that happen in that production environment, and that we're constantly building a more and more stable enterprise environment, technology ecosystem. Kind of mapping back to what Dean was saying about the fact that a lot of web scale companies and these digital era companies didn't get to where they are scalability wise by accident, but they have they're constantly refactoring their architecture, they're redesigning their code bases, they're redesigning their technology infrastructure to make it more and more stable. So we really want to make sure that we're baking in stability and resiliency and security into the production environment as we're accelerating through this pipeline, so that we can enable a warm handoff from dev to ops. And as we do that, we circle back up to that 12 o'clock position, and the more effective we are at building a healthy pipeline that involves collaboration and communication between dev and ops through that pipeline, we come back up to the 12 o'clock position, and what used to be a wall of confusion between dev and ops has now come down. We enable that warm handoff, we transition cleanly to an operations mode, and then we start our planning cycle all over again. So that's the gist of the framework. Behind the framework, we offer a few categories of services. So when we engage clients, we're doing these kinds of things. So we have a menu of assessment sorts of offerings where we can perform health checks. These are basic assessments, more topical level assessments, interview-based and online survey-based questionnaires that allow us to cull information about the effectiveness of the deployment pipeline and the environments, and it gives us a starting point for having conversations about where to go next. And then a series of workshops that allow us to do deep dives into the current state of a client's deployment pipeline and DevOps capabilities. We'll do things like value stream mapping and apply the theory of constraints to identify the biggest bottlenecks and create a plan for going forward, and do some root cause analysis to identify the areas of improvement that can give us the best bang for the buck. And then after we have the lay of the land and have a transformation plan and a backlog, so what comes out of that transformation planning workshop is often a backlog of technology enablers that maps directly to SAFE, where we can move those technology enablers through the connected Kanban system within SAFE, portfolio level, moving through the program level backlogs and then down into the team level backlogs, but we're really a focus on the enabling capabilities that will deliver DevOps capabilities down there. That's kind of the output of the assessment phase. And then we have these learning aids. We definitely leverage the suite of SAFE course materials. So we do a lot of leading SAFE. SAFE for Teams is a big one, and usually what we do is we immediately follow that SAFE for Teams run, each SAFE for Teams run, with a special course that we've developed, a 2-day course called DevOps for the Agile Enterprise. So this allows us at the time we're doing SAFE training to also come in and do some DevOps training with largely the same audience to get the entire release train into the mode of not only developing software in an agile way, but also delivering that software to market using DevOps techniques. And then the improvement stuff over on the right is really where we apply embedded coaching to build people and to redefine and enhance processes within our clients' environments, and actually start to build out the technical platform and the tool chains that enable acceleration through that pipeline. So here really quickly, just a little bit more of a view into the health check. So there's a maturity model behind our DevOps offering with quantitative and qualitative measures across a number of different dimensions that map over to the value target diagram over on the right. And over on the right, you can see where the results of the assessment have been plotted on the inside rings of that value target framework. So again, this just gives us a feeling for the current state, the baseline state of our customers' DevOps health and delivery capabilities. We use this as a starting point for starting to identify and put bullseyes on those capabilities that need the most improvement and will return the best bang for the buck. Then we have training and workshops and embedded coaching, like I mentioned before. So our primary offerings on the education side over on the left are our DevOps for the Agile Enterprise course, which is a 2-day course. And this is not just for dev people and ops people, but we're starting to see a lot more cybersecurity representation and architecture representation, and even up into the management ranks, and sometimes even Scrum Masters and product owners are attending these DevOps courses. And then the workshops over on the left, and the pictures over on the right just kind of give you a feel for what we do in those workshops. So it's we make use of visual information radiators. We like to put information on the walls, and really build in a lot of hands-on work, a lot of group activity work, and really getting into the client's context. So a little bit of theory, but heavily biased toward working with our clients and practitioners on understanding their environments and delving into their specific areas of need and their requirements from a DevOps perspective. Okay, and then last slide. At the end of the day, this is what we're trying to drive. So probably most people are familiar with the graphic on the left, which comes from SAFE, and we always like to be aligned with this picture. These are the outcomes that we're really driving toward. We like to keep an eye on the prize, and so through all of this, we're really trying to drive these improvements in time to market and quality and productivity, and we never want to forget about employee engagement. Over on the right, this view actually comes from the Puppet Labs State of DevOps report. So these are real metrics that come from ongoing studies and surveys around the effectiveness of DevOps in the industry. So we're seeing big numbers over here out of companies that are doing DevOps effectively. 200 times more frequent deployments, 2,500 times faster time to market. These are big numbers, and we're really here to enable transformations with our clients that enable these kinds of big numbers, which really turn into game changers for these enterprises. So I think that wraps up our content delivery section. We have a few minutes left for questions. So I think at this point, I'll give the ball back over to Beth, who can lead us through the Q&A.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Dean.
Hey, Mark. Could I comment for a second? So
yes, please.
The value target framework, as you know, I'm really enamored by that for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a visualization, which we're huge fans of the larger problem space, right? Build, test, deploy, et cetera. But I think you glossed over something really important, that as a kind of a continuing assessment framework becomes the action plan. So as you've described to me your services, you would simply do an assessment and you'd produce that little radar chart that shows in the middle there. And then you pick the tallest pole, the longest pole in the tent, and say, why is that a problem? Why is it so difficult for us just to say, why does it take us 6 days, not 6 minutes to do regression testing? And you do root cause analysis and corrective action. So I really love the programmatic way that you approach moving from the outer rings, kind of the current state, to the inner rings. And SAFE is a framework as well, but it tends to be fairly static. And your framework is designed for continuous application and to provide a roadmap for exactly what we need to do next to increase our throughput velocity and to increase the timeliness of our releases. So I think it's a really cool way to approach not just kind of the static view, but the dynamic view, and to see a future state and work to that future state very logically.
Great, thanks a lot for that, Dean. Yeah, it was designed to be a living visual information radiator. So, in a lot of ways, you can you can view it as a glorified radar chart, right? That's kind of one use of it, and we definitely use it from that standpoint. But we use it to guide the entire transformation. So we print this on big poster boards and we put it in public places with our other big visual information radiators, and it becomes a conversation piece. We mark it up with dots and sticky notes to show, where we'd like to be targeting delivery. How much of this do we want to be able to do in one iteration versus an entire PI? And we set goals for ourselves, and then as we achieve those goals, we make adjustments to the picture in real time. And so, imagine an office environment where we have these big visual information radiators up, we have these value targets up in key places that are marked up, and whenever the plan changes, either one way or another, we've achieved a goal and we need to set new targets, well, we just update those visual information radiators, and that becomes sort of it signposts the next phase of the plan for us. So thanks for that, Dean.
Cool.
All right.
Dean and Mark, we have about 5 more minutes, and we have a couple of good questions. I'll throw the question out there and then let you guys answer. So one of the questions was, how is it best, or what methods have been successful for you to convince clients or their teammates that Agile, Safe, and DevOps goes hand in hand as opposed to 2 separate framework approaches?
I guess from the safe standpoint, DevOps is just assumed, and I think that while maybe 7 or 8 years ago it talked a lot about the deployment part of the process, I think that we've grown as an industry to understand that if I want to deploy a small batch, I have to have a small batch to deploy. So if I do a deployment and there's nothing in the pipeline, I'm going to be starved. So I guess I would say that we just approach this as a harmonious whole. So it's kind of not Agile plus DevOps, although maybe we think of it that way because, Agile development versus DevOps, it's just absolutely integral to it. So it's inescapable. So Agile plus DevOps is the only way to answer the problem. If you look at the DevOps handbook, that book is probably 40 or 50% lean, 10 or 20% knowledge sharing, and 30 or 40%, whatever the remainder is, on the specific tools and techniques of basically facilitating safe and effective deployment.
Mark, any further comments?
Yeah, I think I would echo that by saying that it's really a singular conversation. So it sort of started for us as having 2 separate conversations. We'd have a conversation about, do you want to be Agile? And then we'd have a conversation about, well, you should be thinking about DevOps as well, because they go hand in hand. But really, it's now evolving into a single conversation, right? If you want to be an Agile enterprise, you have to be thinking about Agile software development, and you have to be thinking about DevOps as your delivery mechanism too. It addresses the entire value stream. We talk about the value stream as being a concept to cache kind of scenario from end to end. Well, in order to get from concept to cache, you've got to get from concept to working code there in the middle, and that's really the Agile piece, right? Going from concept to code. At the end of every sprint, we want to have working software with demos, but that doesn't mean that demoable code is fit for production use, right? So we need to be able to get that code delivered to our end users in a production environment. That's really the code to cache scenario that we define. That is enabled by DevOps. So really, if we're talking about an Agile enterprise, we have to be able to enable agility and efficiency through the entire value stream. That means not only the concept to code piece, but the code to cache piece as well. It's one conversation.
Okay, thank you. Another good question, do you find it helpful to bring in a change management or organizational change resource to help with the heavy lifting for this transformation?
That's an easy one. Yes. Even if you look at SAFE alone, it is a substantial organizational change. DevOps is a change equally big. If we take this naively from a techie standpoint and say, here's what we're going to do next because it's way cool and it's going to have these business benefits, and you don't have a way to evolve the culture of the organization, you're going to be kind of stuck. And we have 1 or 2 partners that I would say that are probably, I'd say they center themselves around their ability to do OCM, and they're probably stronger there than the technical practices in SAFE or DevOps, but they do a good job because we're working with technical people, and we can bring those people, to the table to address the issues of, whatever we're having in our DevOps value stream delays. But if you can't really address the organizational change management issues and understand how to communicate the vision, how to develop that coalition for change, how to get the right training in place, how to set the new practices, and how to bring new habits, you're going to be pretty limited in your ability to be effective in that transformation.
All right, thank you, Dean. And last question, because we're up at the top of the hour, can you speak to infrastructure differences?
I'll leave that kind of general question to Marc.
Thanks, Dean. I had a feeling you were going to do that. So there's not much context there, but infrastructure differences. Is there any additional detail in that question?
No, that was it.
Okay, so I guess I'll interpret that in a particular way, and maybe it's the right way, maybe it's maybe the intent of the question was differently. But I think something very important to say about infrastructure differences is, when we think about DevOps, when we talk about DevOps, at some point we need to have a technology conversation, right? ICON, with our practice, we don't like to lead with technology. We don't like to lead with automation because we want to make sure that we have healthy people and healthy processes and lean processes in place first before we really start to automate, because we don't want to automate broken processes. But we really can't have DevOps without automation throughout the entire pipeline. So one thing that we've learned through our experience in the field is that there are a lot of different technologies that can be applied in a lot of different ways to achieve DevOps. We need to be cognizant of what works well within the culture. We need to consider environmental differences, whether we're doing on-prem work or off-prem work, whether we have cloud scenarios or multi-cloud scenarios, the programming languages that we're working with, everything from build management and merge management and branching strategies to pipeline orchestration mechanisms and automated testing mechanisms, and how we're configuring environments and building environments from a sort of infrastructure as code perspective, and then the overall deployment environments. There's a lot of infrastructure, a lot of technology to take into consideration. There are a lot of different forms of the pipeline, so as we enter engagements, we really need to put together the pipelines that work best for the context.
Okay, thank you very much, Marc. Thank you, Dean and Marc, for this very informative presentation today. Thank you to the audience for attending. We will send you a copy of the presentation, the recorded presentation, and we will also post it out on our website. And feel free to reach out to us with any further questions. We have a couple of other good questions, Marc and Dean, that I might send off to you to get answers that we can return to the audience. We appreciate it.
Great.
Happy to do it.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
This concludes our presentation.